God bless everybody today. It's May 28th of 2021. It's 12:13 a.m. Central. Yes, I'm working late trying to figure out how Bitcoin is going to affect us in the next few weeks. You can find all my eschatology, end-of-day survival articles at endofdaysurvival.com. It has all my articles, flowcharts, graphs, videos, anything I've ever presented to the population is out here, paradigms, everything. It's all free. Come out, check it out. If you have any questions, please leave them so that I can answer them. I try to get back as soon as possible. So let's get into the Bitcoin thing. So just so you know, I'm not a trader in the markets, and I have no, I basically, nothing else. I hold crypto, buy it, I hold it, or potentially, occasionally, if the market's up and down, I will swing trade. I'm not a scalper or some of these people that micro scalp, which mean they're making pennies as the movement of the market's up and down. They can shave pennies or cents or sometimes dollars off of these swings, and so you really have to know a lot about how to do that, and I don't really care to get that deep into that world, but I will buy a cryptocurrency at a bottom level price, and as it moves up I may sell it, take a little profit, and then wait for it to drop, and then buy in again and try to make a little extra of that stock. So there is a little bit that you can do on those levels. So I noticed that I've been following this one channel, and I won't name them. A couple guys were talking about this. This one guy, there's about 2 or 3 guys I really follow on this channel. They seem to have a clue. I really didn't go to this channel until I started to see the problem with the charts, and then I went out to the channel. I realized that some of these guys seem to be in line with what I've been trying to show you. Tonight they were talking about this Wyckoff method and how Richard Wyckoff built a method of basically looking at the markets and everything in general and finding harmony in how things work together. If you want to read up about him, he's considered one of the 20th century pioneers in technical approach to studying the stock market. He's considered one of the 5 titans of technical analysis, along with these other gentlemen. And at age 15, he took a stock job with the New York brokerage and basically went pretty far with this. But this is not a method that a lot of people are aware of, and I wasn't aware of it. It was something brought to my attention, but I thought it was really interesting in how it seemed to mimic one of the charts, Bitcoin, and potentially Dogecoin as we move forward. And so I thought it was an extremely, interesting article. You can go check this out. Learn a little bit about, grafting and different things like that. Now, I'm not an expert in any of this, and this is very new to me. So I'm trying to understand exactly what he's doing here. One thing I did realize is he understood it, that all institutions were basically, the way he looked at it, all institutions were combined as basically one entity, or what he called the composite man. And through that, they would manipulate the stock markets so that, of course, they would win and you would lose. And if he looked at the way this worked and the pricing cycle and how at the bottom, we're oversold, so they mark the price up. They have more inventory down here, so it's the accumulation area. They mark it up. It has a greater demand as it moves up. Then it gets to a point where it's either overpriced or overbought, and then of course it's marked down, and then we run into more of a supply than demand, where the demand was over here. he also came up with different analysis like this. Now this is an extremely important chart, and this is the one I'm looking at right now. If you go into Bitcoin, you'll realize that we've had a similar pattern that we're working into. Okay, I believe we're actually about right here in this pattern, or what would be in the phase B part of the pattern, or actually starting to move into the dip up. And we could potentially see within the next 2 days a increase in the price to where everybody will think that this is actually pretty comfortable and this is gaining traction and Bitcoin's starting to heal. And then we're going to retest the bottom, which was over here, the very bottom. And then it's going to spring back for a while, and it's going to test some of these resistance lines. And now, one thing I probably haven't stated, because I know a lot of you guys aren't real familiar with some of this stuff, so the terminology I've sort of shorted you a little bit. So the top areas where it comes up and it hits, these are resistance lines, where it's trying to punch through these resistance lines to go up. But the bottom lines are actually support lines, and I've never really stated that. I've always called them resistance lines, but that's not technically right. These are support lines because they allow it to have a floor so it won't fall through, where these are actually bust. It's like a plane trying to bust through clouds. Sometimes it hits concrete clouds. I call them concrete clouds, where it can't really bust through the clouds, and then it comes back down, and then it finally breaks through and comes back down. So realize that the top lines are resistance line, and these are support lines down here. But that matters because I've been talking about, if you look at the Bitcoin, when you get into that 40 to 50,000 level before you got to the peak, which was 64,000 over here, it's hard for this to break through, and so it's got to bust through these resistance lines, and a lot of times it's rejected and then it comes back down. It's sort of like Pong. It comes up, it hits, and then it might hit another wall, and then it comes down, it hits, and then it comes back up, and then it hits back down. And it works in these troughs, so you can sort of see that. So I took this chart and I tried to apply it to Bitcoin's chart. I want to sort of show you what I'm talking about. So if we look at Bitcoin's chart, you can see we started out, well, it was in the very beginning. It didn't have a lot of traction, and then it finally hit. That was Bitcoin. Finally started to get an uplift, and the plane started to take off, and then it had some turbulence, and then it came up to a point of 64.9. And then it came back down. It had a small dip around Saturday, right before Saturday Night Live, and then it came back up, and around May 13th, or I believe it's May 13th, we started to see this downtrend. When Elon Musk sort of injured Bitcoin, might have been May 11th, it was like May. So to be safe, I went out, looked, and it was May 16th when Elon Musk retaliated or attacked Bitcoin, and that dropped those markets quite a bit, if I'm not mistaken. So we can look at that. So around the 16th is when he actually did do the damage. So if we go to our day candle and we go to the 16th, right about in here we saw this start to go downhill, and it's pretty much gone downhill since. The trend is down, so like if I bring my lines up, I've probably got more lines here than you actually want to see. The trend is still down. It's still trenching. It's sort of trying to move lateral, but it's still in a downward trajectory, so it's not, the plane is still moving and it's getting closer to the ground all the time. Okay, even though it's trying to reach out and come up, it's got all this interference. It's not wanting to do that, and it's still moving in this downtrend. So I wanted to bring this chart up. This is Binance, Bitcoin 4-hour chart. As you can see, we had this massive drop, and then it started to rebound. But all trends are still moving down. The lines are starting to move up, but as you can see, it came down, it bounced here, came up, came down, bounced up a little, came back down, retested the low, which is here, and then came back up, and it hit a peak here, which is not higher than this peak, a little higher than that peak, but it's not higher than this peak, and then it started to reject itself again against this 40,000 wall. As you can see over here, it's 40,000 wall. It didn't like it. It started to punch through it, but then it came back down, and now it's coming back down. Okay, so how does that relate to the chart that Wyckoff put together? I did feel it was extremely interesting that the Wyckoff chart lines up extremely well with Bitcoin's chart. Okay, and so this is what I'm trying to understand, if there's a pattern here. And Mr. Wyckoff believed that there was this, that this works through basically everything, that there's a pattern. He laid this against basically all charts through all stocks and realized that this pattern formed, and that if you could look at how they were manipulating the markets, you could tell they were going to do certain things. And a lot of this has to do with removal of the institutions. So like, you know, if the big boys don't want somebody in their group, they can do a certain action within the market to basically reject or make that person sell out because of fear. If they don't know what's going on and they're losing their money and their business in the process, they're going to get to a point where this bottoms out and they will just bail and get out. Okay, so that's a problem. Now this chart and these red numbers are indications here of the time stamps of when they occurred on the Bitcoin chart itself. So if you go back into the chart, you realize that there's indicators out here like this. Okay, so that's where I'm getting these indicators on this chart, that if you take functional points within the chart of Bitcoin, you can graft it out on this chart that Wyckoff presented as a fundamental technique to determine how markets are going to move, and that if you graph this out, you could potentially see just exactly what is coming. And so if this is the case, then we sort of might know where we are in real time. So if you look at Binance's chart, you realize that we had these two low peaks right here. Okay, you had a descent that spikes up and down. See that? And that you hit a low, low, and then a low that's not quite as low as the first low. And so if you go to that Wyckoff chart and you look at this chart that he built for us to look at and use, you'll realize that these are the 2 points of the low on that chart, on Bitcoin's chart. So this is your descent, and we can map these out based on the last points of descent, where we had the bottom and the last peak before we hit the bottom, that first low, low, to the rebound, to the next testing of the low, to a rebound through the resistance lines to this point here, and then it comes back down, retests a lower bottom than here, comes back up, breaks through the original resistance line here, and then basically just crashes. And this is where I've been concerned about, is just how low this will go. So if you go to this graph and you look at it over time, you'll notice I talk about these dips and resistance points, these lower points of resistance. You need to use the resistance and points within here, but you also have to go back and look at the additional resistance points that you've hit, or the lows, or some of that. Okay, so you got to go back and look at that. And so that's where some of these numbers are going to come from, is some of these further date back, because this is the memory, this is the history. And so when it hits these resistance points, even though it's in the future, it's going to remember this, and it's going to hit certain points that it doesn't want to go back down, and it might go up, or it may go up and it will hit, actually if it goes down and hits a support line, it will stop, bounce back up, or it might hit a top resistance line and bounce back down. As you zoom into these charts, you can go in and you can actually start to see these numbers and the physical date when they occurred. And so you can go back and you can graph this out. And so that's basically where I pulled these. I got this date here, which is May 18th. If you go to an hour chart, like the 4-hour chart, and you pull that up, it'll actually give you the time stamp down here. If you look just below that, around the volume here, you can see the times. So you can map these points out. So if we look at Wyckoff's chart and we map it out based on that first low dip to the second low dip to the where we are now, which I believe is about here, within the next day or two, we're going to see a move up in the market through this resistance barrier to a point of deflection, and then it's going to move back down and retest this low here within a few days. Okay, and so I wanted to sort of show you what those time stamps are. So if you go out to the chart and you add the points from the Bitcoin chart to this chart, you'll notice that it does follow the pattern, and that's pretty intense to think that you can actually understand how a market can move and sort of predict what potentially could happen. And that's what I'm trying to figure out. Now, whether this is right or not, I don't know. But if you follow his method, and he is one of the pioneers in this, and did create this structural method, I would think that you would have to look at him and go, wow, that's pretty interesting, and that this chart pretty much does follow where we're heading here. Now, the timestamps as we move forward, I'm not really sure of. I can give you a guesstimation on when I think these things are going to happen. So, Bitcoin was shot by Elon Musk up here, and this thing started to hemorrhage out, and it has been hemorrhaging out for over a week now, since what I said, the 16th. It's 28th now. And it hit this this low here. So you move down the chart, you get to what they call the first preliminary support. That was at 42,111.2. That actually occurred on May 17th at 1100 hours. Then it bounced back up on May 18th at 1 o'clock at 45,823.4. And then it came down and hit this selling climb, what they call the selling climax, which is at 29,800 on the. It's crazy how they hit these whole numbers like 45,000, 28,800. But anyway, I don't know how that works. Usually it should be fractional, but I believe this has been manipulated to a certain degree. So at 29,800, and you had that selling climax, that was on May 19th at 7 p.m. When you get to what they call the automatic rally, and so you get that bottom, and then of course you get a rally up, that was 42,559.8, and that was May 20th at 8 o'clock. Then it came back down, and it did a secondary test at 31,078.7 on May 23rd at 11 o'clock. Then it came back up, had a little bullishness to it. That was 40,893.6 on May 26th at 3 o'clock. Now, we are basically right here, okay? And so that's why I'm thinking we're going to hit this next high in the next day or two, because you go to Bitcoin's chart, I can show you where we're at. So this is when Musk shot the arrow. It started to fall. It came down and it tested that first low. Then it bounced back up. And it came down and tested the second low. Then it bounced back up, and it's starting to come down into that last trough before it shoots up. Remember that on the... So it comes down, comes back up, comes down, comes back up. We're right in this area right here, probably about right in here. And we're going to start to see this acceleration up to test these resistance lines. It's going to bounce off the top resistance line and come back down. If you go to Bitcoin's chart, we can show you where that's at. So if you get to Bitcoin's chart, and that's your first low, then it came back up, it retested the bottom, it didn't catch it, came back up, came to a peak, and then we're starting to go back down again before I believe it will come back up. Now this is based on the chart. If this doesn't happen, well then I don't know what to tell you, Wyckoff's wrong. But based on the chart and the look of the chart, he might be right. And so if you go to his chart, you can see that we're in this last little dip before we actually would move up this weekend. And that would make sense because they closed a lot of the Bitcoin contracts right before the Memorial Day weekend. You had a massive influx of inflows into AMC and GameStop, which usually means that the crypto markets tend to be down a little bit. And the markets open on the weekend, so a lot of people are going to be in crypto this weekend, during a long weekend, excuse me. And so Saturday and Sunday you could see, a fairly large rally. And then you have that Monday where we have a holiday. So all markets are down. I believe the European markets are down, or a lot of the markets are down over there, as well as the markets here are down due to Memorial Day weekend. And so you would see potentially the markets seeing what's going on with Bitcoin during the weekend, and then maybe a potential mass sell-off during the on that Tuesday. And so if you look at that chart, I can somewhat speculate, and this is only speculation and opinion because I don't know for sure how this is going to play out. Well, let's say if this was on May 19th, you bring this up to May 20th, we get to this date here, that's May 23rd. It comes up to May 26th, which was 2 days ago. Now we're down to May 28th, down in this little trough. And then by, I say, potentially August, I think it's August 2nd, we could be down here because the markets will open. They'll realize Bitcoin isn't healthy because it's still hemorrhaging down. Even though it's moving lateral, it's still moving down. And so Bitcoin's chart, even though this might bounce down and come up and retest like the 42 to 45,000, I believe that's that top resistant point. It will then plummet back down even below this level here. Okay, so you'd be down, it's hard to tell on this chart, but you'd be down in here somewhere, okay? And so if you look at his chart and you count the amount of days that you're looking at between the intervals, I think you can get a pretty good guesstimation on when this might actually occur. So if we're right here, and it's May 28th, and we take this into 2 more days, we're into the 30th, we get the drop potentially on the 2nd, so that would be the Tuesday coming up. Actually, the Tuesday is June 1st. So, like I say, if we're here on the 28th, the 29th, 30th, 31st, or you get to the 1st, 2nd, this might actually be somewhat in the middle of the week, like Wednesday-ish, possibly, if you take these intervals into play. So you could open up, have the weekend, have a rally, get into like Monday, Tuesday, and then you realize Bitcoin's just not gaining any traction, and then it tanks out completely, and then this, moves down about a week. Potentially that Monday open of the week after, you might have this real deep drop. I believe the Monday after the holiday or Memorial Day weekend, which potentially would be back here, is June 7th. So that open on potentially Monday or Tuesday of next week, once we bring this down to a lower low, it comes back up, works throughout the week, and the weekend hits this top resistance line, but it doesn't break through it. It doesn't even hit this top resistance line. It stops, and then it comes back down, and by maybe Tuesday, Wednesday of next week, we could potentially see what they call the spring. It's sort of a trap. Because what will happen is the institution or the composite man or the group of, industry people trying to squeeze out whatever player or institution they're trying to squeeze out and get them to sell out, they're applying pressure all the way down into the point where it creates a fear factor down here. You hit 27,500 or 25,000, which is a major fear factor. This stock was at 64,000 up here. Now it's at 25,000 or 22,500 or 20,000. People are going to be bailing on this stock. Some people are going to be picking it up, but a lot of the institutional people don't seem to understand what's going on here, because they're losing so much money from when they had bought in over here when it went up, because it came up here and then came down, and so they were buying through this area to the peak, and then it came down, did all this to the point where it's going to potentially crash in the next week and a half to 10 days, week to 10 days. And then it busts through these support lines just long enough. Now, how far does it bust through the support line here and go down? If we got 20,000 Bitcoin a coin like Doge is going to be, even at 25,000, you're talking 16-cent Doge, and you get down here, you're talking, well, where I thought we might be potentially, and that's 8-cent Doge. If you go below that, this is carnage on the market, and you could see, really low, below 8 cents. And, if you go to 4 cents, that's half what 8 cents is. And so you're cutting these valuations in half as you move down. And that's devastation on the markets. But, excuse me, but once we hit this drop, this bottom, wherever that might be, we don't know, and I'm using Bitcoin as an example here, it will finally come back up, bust through the support lines, retest the bottom support line, come back, retest the top support line, and then start to accelerate over through this support line barrier to back down, and then finally come back up to where we would see potentially a new high. So this potentially over here in phase E would be a better high than potentially here, which was 64,000. Now I can only speculate that as we move out of this trough and come back up next 2 days, we're going to see potentially a 45,000 point high. We're just bouncing off this resistance between 42,559.8 and 45,000. It's going to come up through this resistance line, hit it, and then come back down. And this is your bottom resistance line, and this is your top resistance line. Just as on your support lines, this is your top support line and your bottom support line, and potentially this, as it comes down, it's going to break through this last support and end up in this area here. This is pretty extreme in any market, and it will affect the equity or stock markets. So I don't want to get too far into this. I believe that we've already seen this occur. I believe that we're in this dip prior to the weekend. This is probably like a Friday event. You get into Saturday, the market starts moving this up. People aren't using the normal markets. You got a long weekend. You got people that have finalized contracts, all kinds of things going on. And so you potentially could see some major movement in the market to where today we saw that drop from the AC or AMC and GameStop thing. So that potentially was this little dip in the next day into Friday, and then it moves up and then comes back down, retests this resistance line in between these two supports or these two resistance walls, and then comes back down, and then really drops out the bottom by Tuesday or Wednesday of next week. At least that's the time frame I'm looking at. And then it has a fairly fast rebound. This could potentially happen in a couple weeks. We could see this, you take a couple weeks from here to here. This is another, potential couple weeks to get it back out of this hole. So I'm just speculating. I do not know. We'll find out whether any of this matters. But Wyckoff seemed to have a lot going on, and so I'm going to hopefully follow his path and see where that ends up. God bless everybody, and just keep an eye on this. This will affect everybody before we're done.